Eleanor Vance had grown used to silence. Her small farm sat on the edge of Briarfield, a sleepy southern town where everyone knew each other's dog's name and the local sheriff still did house calls. At 67, Eleanor's days were quiet-filled with gardening, reading, and feeding the 2 remaining hens in her backyard. Since her husband died 8 years ago and her children moved away, the solitude had wrapped itself around her like an old quilt, worn but familiar. That Tuesday evening started like any other. The sun had just begun to dip below the tree line, casting golden streaks across the sky, when Eleanor heard a knock. Not at her front door, but at the side gate, the wooden one, next to the tool shed. She hadn't heard a sound come from that side of the house in months, maybe even years. She froze, wiping her hands on her apron. Her heart began to thump, not in fear, exactly, but in anticipation, the kind that feels like a warning. She stepped outside, squinting into the fading light. 2 figures stood beyond the gate, slim, motionless, identical. Boys. Twins. Their skin was deep brown, their hair tightly coiled. They looked around 12 or 13, wearing oversized hoodies and worn sneakers caked with dust. One clutched a plastic grocery bag. The other held a cracked phone in both hands, as if expecting it to come alive with instructions. They didn't say a word, just stared. Eleanor opened the gate, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Can I help you, boys?" The one with the phone spoke first. "Are you Eleanor Vance?" She blinked. "Yes." The boys exchanged a glance. The one with the bag nodded toward her porch. "We need somewhere to stay, just for tonight." Eleanor hesitated. She didn't let people in, not since her husband died. Especially not strangers, especially not children with no adults around. But something in their faces, not just fear, but exhaustion, made her hesitate. Their eyes weren't wild. They weren't running from something. They were running to something. "I don't have much," she said quietly. "But you can come in. Wash up. Eat." They nodded in unison, stepping carefully through the gate, as if afraid it would snap shut behind them. Inside, the kitchen lights hummed softly. Eleanor poured water into 2 mismatched glasses and set out peanut butter sandwiches. The boys ate without speaking, as if they'd been trained not to. After a few bites, the one with the phone finally said, "I'm Malik. This is Micah." Eleanor nodded. "You brothers?" "Twins," Micah replied. "Fraternal, but people say we look identical." "You do," Eleanor said. "Where are your parents?" They didn't answer. Malik looked down at the screen of his dead phone. Micah kept chewing, his jaw tense. Eleanor sighed. She'd seen that look before in her students, back when she taught middle school. The look of kids who knew the world didn't care. "You boys in some kind of trouble?" Malik met her eyes for the first time. "Not yet." That night, Eleanor gave them the old guest room, the one no one had used since her sister passed away. She watched them through a crack in the door, curled up on opposite sides of the bed like cats who didn't want to admit they missed each other. She went to bed with her mind racing. Who were they? Why her? Why this farm? At 2:11 a.m., she heard the creak of the back stairs. She got up, careful not to startle him. But when she opened the kitchen door, she found Malik on the back steps, staring out at the barn. He didn't jump when she approached. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked gently. Malik shook his head. He said this place was safe. "Who did?" "Our brother." "Older?" Malik nodded. "He's gone now." Eleanor frowned. "Gone where?" The boy's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked up at her. "He said if anything happened, come here, to Eleanor Vance. He said you were the only one we could trust." Eleanor's heart dropped into her stomach. She hadn't heard her full name used like that in years. In the morning, Eleanor tried calling the sheriff's office, just in case. Not to report the boys, but to check if someone had reported them missing. Deputy Harris, a younger man who still called her Miss Vance out of habit, promised to look into it. But something about Malik's words stuck with her. He said you were the only one we could trust. Who was he? Why would a child know her name? And then she remembered. 12 years ago, a boy named Jeremiah. Foster system. Trouble in school. Quiet. Brilliant. With a gift for drawing. She had tutored him after hours when no one else wanted to bother. Helped him graduate. He'd been adopted by a family out of town and disappeared from her radar. Could it be? The next day began gray and cold. Eleanor stood by the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, watching the boys move silently across the yard. Micah knelt near the chicken coop, letting one of the hens peck curiously at his shoelace. Malik leaned against the fence with his hood up, staring at the barn like it was holding its breath. They hadn't run. They hadn't asked for anything. They hadn't even turned on the TV. It was as if they didn't want to take up space, as if they feared being noticed even here, on a forgotten stretch of land where no one ever came uninvited. Eleanor stepped outside. The air smelled like damp earth and pine needles. You boys cold? She asked. Micah shook his head, but Malik gave a small nod. She handed him her old fleece jacket. He took it without a word. I called the sheriff's office, she said, watching for a reaction. Just to check if anyone's looking for you. Micah's body tensed, but Malik didn't even blink. And? Malik asked. No one filed a report. Malik nodded once. Good. Eleanor hesitated. You gonna tell me what's going on? Micah looked down at the ground. We didn't want to come here. Not at first, but he said, if something ever went wrong, we had to. He said you helped him once, when no one else would. Jeremiah, Eleanor said. Both boys turned. You knew him? Malik asked, like he was still hoping she'd say no. I did. I tutored him when he was in 8th grade. He had a mind like fire. Never stopped asking questions. Micah swallowed. He died 3 weeks ago. The words fell flat. No build-up, no softening. He was only 24, Eleanor whispered. Malik nodded. It wasn't natural. Eleanor's mouth went dry. What do you mean? He got involved in something. Something he didn't want to tell us about. Said it was dangerous. Said if anything ever happened to him, we had to come here and stay off the grid. Micah pulled a flash drive from his pocket and held it out like it was radioactive. He told us to give this to you. Eleanor stared at it. I don't know anything about computers. He said you'd figure out who to trust, Malik said. That night, Eleanor sat in the living room while the boys slept in the guest room, the flash drive resting like a live wire on the coffee table. She hadn't turned on her laptop in months, but now the old machine hummed to life. She hesitated before inserting the drive. There was only one file, a single video. Jeremiah appeared on screen, older than she remembered, his face leaner but his eyes just as intense. If you're watching this, I'm probably gone, he said. I know how that sounds, but I didn't come into this blind. I've seen things, learned things. I didn't want the boys to get caught in it, but I knew they might. He took a shaky breath. I found evidence, real evidence, about a company called Langford Dynamics. They're not what they pretend to be. They traffic more than tech. Their community outreach is a front. What they're doing with kids, it's criminal. I've stored everything on a secure server. The key is split in two. One half is on this drive. The other, well, let's just say the twins aren't just witnesses, they're the access. Eleanor sat frozen. I need someone who remembers me. Someone who still believes people are worth saving. Miss Vance, it's you." The video ended. Eleanor stared at the screen, her heartbeat heavy in her chest. She didn't know Langford dynamics, but she knew Jeremiah hadn't been a liar. He was cautious, brilliant, and clearly in too deep. In the middle of the night, Eleanor heard a vehicle. Not her imagination, the gravel outside crunching under tires, the low rumble of an engine that didn't belong to any neighbor she knew. She peeked through the curtain. A black SUV, tinted windows, parked just past her mailbox. She turned off the lights and moved to the boy's room. "Wake up," she whispered. They sat up instantly, already alert, like they'd trained themselves for this. "There's someone outside." Malik didn't ask who. He grabbed his bag. Micah followed without a word. They moved through the back door, Eleanor leading them with a flashlight, her boots barely making a sound in the wet grass. They hid in the root cellar beneath the barn, the place where Bill used to store pickled vegetables and backup tools. She hadn't opened it in years. The three of them sat in silence, surrounded by the earthy scent of old wood and soil. Above them, faint footsteps crunched outside the house. A door creaked. Someone entered. Eleanor tightened her grip on the flashlight. Micah whispered, "Do you think they're from Langford?" She didn't answer. The footsteps lingered. Then silence. Then an engine starting. When they emerged 2 hours later, the SUV was gone. The front door had been left open. Nothing was taken. But on the kitchen counter, placed neatly beside the sink, sat something Eleanor hadn't seen in over a decade, a photograph of her and Jeremiah at the school science fair. Someone had been watching longer than she thought. And now they wanted her to know it. The next morning, the house smelled like black coffee and dread. Eleanor stood by the kitchen counter, staring at the photo someone had left the night before. She and Jeremiah, side by side at the school science fair. He was no older than 12, all crooked teeth and eager eyes. She remembered that day clearly. We'd built a solar-powered water pump and explained it with the confidence of a college professor. On the back of the photo, someone had typed 4 words. "You should have stayed out." Not handwritten, typed, which meant intentional, calculated. It wasn't just a threat, it was a reminder that someone had been watching her for years, waiting. She turned the photograph over again and again in her hands like it might give her a different answer. But it didn't. Nothing changed, except her resolve. By the time the twins woke up, Eleanor had already made eggs and toast, packed 3 duffel bags, and dusted off an old metal lockbox from her attic. Inside it were some papers, a sealed envelope with her will, and a revolver she hadn't touched in years. Micah noticed it first. "You're leaving?" he asked. Eleanor turned from the stove and looked at both boys. "We are." Malik sat at the table, still groggy, but alert. "Where?" "I know someone upstate. She used to work in federal cybercrime. Quiet now. Teaches coding at a community college and rescues retired greyhounds. If there's anyone who can help us figure out what's on that flash drive and what Langford is doing, it's her." Micah glanced at Malik. "But what if they're watching her too?" "They might be," Eleanor said. "But she's not the kind to scare easy." Malik leaned forward. "Why are you doing this?" "What do you mean? We brought you danger. You don't owe us anything." Eleanor met his gaze, calm but firm. "I didn't raise my kids to run from people who need help, and I didn't teach Jeremiah to believe in good people just so I could prove him wrong after he's gone." Neither boy said a word. They didn't need to. By noon, they were on the road. Eleanor's old station wagon groaned in protest, but it still ran. She'd learned to maintain it herself after Bill passed the only vehicle she trusted. The route she took wasn't on any GPS. It wound through state roads, service trails, and forgotten gravel paths that didn't appear on maps. 3 hours in, Malik finally broke the silence. Jeremiah used to talk about you, more than anyone. Eleanor kept her eyes on the road. He did? He said you were the only adult who didn't treat him like a problem to be solved. He wasn't a problem. He was a puzzle. Complex, beautiful, a little scattered, but worth the time. Micah smiled faintly. He always said he'd find something big, that one day he'd blow the whole system open. Eleanor glanced at them in the rearview mirror. He might have. They reached the edge of Coldwater County by nightfall. The roads narrowed, the woods thickened. They stopped for gas at a tiny, unmanned station where Eleanor paid in cash. No cameras, no receipts. They reached the edge of the college campus just after 9 p.m. The building was low and modern, tucked behind a line of oaks. A small wooden sign read, Hartley Community Tech Center. Eleanor parked under a broken streetlight and turned off the engine. She teaches night classes, she said. We'll wait here. 10 minutes later, the back door opened, and a woman stepped out. Short locks pulled into a bun, dark-rimmed glasses, and a sharp green jacket. She scanned the lot, then saw Eleanor. Her eyes widened. Eleanor, she called. Eleanor stepped out and waved. Hey, Joe. Joanna Hartley approached fast, with cautious steps. You told me you'd never show up unless it was life or death. I wasn't lying. Joanna looked past her, toward the boys. Her expression shifted. They're why you're here? Yes, and this. Eleanor handed her the flash drive. Joanna studied it for a moment, then pocketed it. We shouldn't talk out here. Come inside. Inside, the tech center was dimly lit and silent, the halls lined with whiteboards and half-assembled 3D printers. Joanna led them to her office, a warm, cluttered space filled with wires, monitors, and motivational posters from the 90s. She plugged in the drive without asking questions. As the files loaded, she spoke softly. I saw the headlines. About Langford. A few whistleblowers vanished. One reporter ended up in a car accident that didn't look accidental. What's on there? Malik asked. Joanna's fingers flew across the keyboard. Encrypted data. Deep encryption. This isn't consumer grade. This is military-level obfuscation. Jeremiah said the key is split, Eleanor added. The other half is in them. Joanna paused. What do you mean? They're biometrics, probably eye scans, maybe DNA. Joanna turned to the boys. Do you trust me? Micah looked uncertain. Malik nodded. He said we could. Joanna opened a drawer and removed a small biometric scanner. This won't hurt. Just look into the lens. Micah went first. The scanner clicked. Then Malik. Joanna returned to her keyboard, and for several minutes, the room was filled with only the sound of keys tapping and fans whirring. Then, a window popped open. Thousands of files, videos, invoices, documents. Langford Dynamics had been running an international trafficking operation under the guise of medical research, using orphanages and private learning academies as testing grounds. Children were disappearing, but the money trail had been clean, covered, sanitized. Until Jeremiah found the hole. Eleanor leaned over Joanna's shoulder. Can you prove this is real? Joanna nodded. Every file is watermarked. Digital signatures match. Some of these go back 15 years. And if we take this public? Malik asked. Joanna's face went still. They'll come after you. Hard. Especially you two. You're not just witnesses, you're evidence, Micah whispered. Then we don't go public. Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. We don't have to be loud. We just have to be smart. Joanna looked at them. There's a journalist, anonymous, independent. She's exposed 3 federal cover-ups in the last 5 years. If we get this to her, she'll burn it all down. Quietly. Safely. Eleanor looked at the twins. Do you want that? Malik nodded slowly. We want them to pay. Joanna smiled grimly. Then let's start. They spent the next 2 hours creating backups, transferring encrypted files to multiple cloud vaults, and creating dead man's switches. Joanna used her darknet contacts to ping the journalist. A meet was arranged. 2 nights from now. As they wrapped up, Eleanor noticed Micah looking out the window. What is it? She asked. There's a car. Across the street. Been there since we got here. Joanna crossed to the window. Can't see the plates. Malik whispered. They found us. Joanna shut down the system and grabbed a duffel bag from her closet. We need to move. Now. Eleanor reached into her coat and pulled out the revolver again. I'll drive. No one questioned her this time. They left through the back of the building, slipped through the alley, and emerged 2 blocks over. Joanna's second car, an old beige Camry, waited behind a mechanic's shop. Safe house is 90 minutes north, she said. Remote. Signal. Blocked. Eleanor started the engine. Micah sat in the back, gripping the folder of printed files like it was holy. Malik stared out the window, whispering something under his breath. Joanna turned in the passenger seat. What did he say to you before he died? Malik looked up. Jeremiah? He said. Don't just survive. Matter. Joanna's voice cracked. He did. They drove into the night, headlights off, radio silent. The war had begun, and 4 strangers in a borrowed car were about to change everything. The road was narrow and curved like a snake through the mountains. Trees leaned in close, blocking the stars. Eleanor kept her hands firm on the wheel, headlights dimmed to avoid drawing attention. The Camry hummed softly beneath her, a quiet, stubborn engine refusing to give up. Malik and Micah sat in the back, silent, alert, their eyes flickering between shadows. Joanna was in the passenger seat, her laptop on her knees, watching for updates from the journalists they were trying to reach. They'd been driving for nearly 2 hours when Joanna finally spoke. She responded. Eleanor glanced sideways. What did she say? She'll meet us at 6 a.m. Tomorrow. Abandoned radio tower outside Chilton Ridge. No surveillance. No signals. 1 entry. 1 exit. Micah's voice came low from the back. Is that safe? Joanna looked back at him. Nothing's safe anymore, but it's the best we've got. They arrived at the safe house just before 2 a.m. It was a run-down cabin deep in the forest, surrounded by frost-covered brush and the skeletal remains of a garden long forgotten. Inside, the air was dry and musty. Dust floated like snow in the beam of Eleanor's flashlight. Still, it was shelter. Malik took first watch. He sat near the window with a pair of old binoculars Joanna had found, scanning the tree line while everyone else tried to sleep. Eleanor lay awake on the floor, staring at the wooden ceiling, her thoughts spinning like a carousel. She'd never run from anything in her life. But now she wasn't just running, she was protecting, guiding. She hadn't realized how heavy that would feel again. Not since Bill died. Just after 4 a.m., a sound snapped her upright. A vehicle, distant but drawing closer. She was on her feet before her boots were on, rushing to the window where Malik was already crouched. He held up 2 fingers. 2 cars, he whispered. SUVs, no lights, military black. Joanna jolted awake. How did they find us? I don't know, Eleanor said, but we're not staying to ask. They moved quickly, but calmly. Files, laptops, drives into bags. Micah and Malik zipped their coats, pulled up their hoods. Joanna opened the hatch in the floorboards. Eleanor hadn't noticed before a cold storage crawl space used decades ago for meat and root vegetables. You hide, Joanna ordered the boys. We'll draw them away. No, Malik said. "We're not letting you do that." "You don't have a choice," Eleanor snapped. "We're not sacrificing you so you can feel brave." Malik froze. Then, slowly, he nodded. They climbed down. Joanna dropped the lid shut and covered it with a rug and a crate. 30 seconds later, headlights cut through the trees. Doors slammed, boots stomped. 3 men approached the cabin with guns drawn and silencers in place. Eleanor stepped outside first. She held a flashlight in one hand, her revolver tucked in the back of her jeans, her breath clouded in the cold air. "We don't want trouble," one of the men said. His voice was calm, businesslike. "You're the ones with guns," she replied. "We just want the boys. They're not here. Don't insult us." "I'm not. But you're not taking anyone from me." One of the men raised his weapon. Joanna stepped out behind Eleanor with her hands up. "Think about what you're doing. If anything happens to those boys, this goes public. Immediately. Every file, every name, every transaction, gone viral in 30 seconds. The man smirked. "You think anyone cares about your threats?" "No," Joanna said, smiling grimly. "But they care about profit. You hurt us. Your operation burns." They stared each other down. Then something changed. A soft, distant noise. A siren. Not police. An alarm. The man frowned. "What the hell is that?" Joanna's eyes widened. "The auto trigger." "What auto trigger?" "If my connection goes dark for more than 15 minutes, the archive unlocks." He turned toward the car. "We need to move." But it was too late. Joanna's dead man's switch had already triggered a blast of data across the darknet whistleblower platforms. Journalists, foreign investigators, and one very angry senator who'd been waiting for this for years. Langford Dynamics was no longer a ghost. It was a headline. And the wolves were no longer hunting. They were fleeing. The SUVs peeled away. The men vanished into the trees. Eleanor didn't move until the sound was gone. Then she opened the hatch. Micah climbed out first, shaking. Malik followed, his face pale. "We heard everything," Micah said. "It's over?" "No," Joanna said. "But we bought time, and time is the one thing they never gave us." By sunrise, they were back in the car, driving toward the radio tower. The journalist was already there. Mid-30s, dark coat, messy hair, tired eyes. Her name was Kayla, and she didn't waste time. She took the drives, scanned files, asked questions. "This is enough to bury them," she said finally, "and to protect the boys." Malik crossed his arms. "Protect how?" "New IDs, placement with a vetted foster family, under government watch, far from Langford's reach." Micah looked to Eleanor. "You're not coming with us?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "I can't go underground. I'd be a liability. But I'll always be here. If you need me, if it's safe." Micah's voice cracked. "I don't want to leave you." Eleanor crouched down, took his hand. "You were never mine to keep, but I'll always be part of your story, and you'll always be part of mine." Malik hugged her. For the first time since this began, Eleanor cried. Amen. 2 months later, Briarfield was quiet again. The media storm had passed. Langford's leadership faced indictment. New whistleblowers stepped forward. The system hadn't changed overnight, but it cracked, and that was something. Eleanor returned to her porch. One morning, she received a small envelope with no return address. Inside were 2 school photos. Micah and Malik, smiling, safe. On the back, they'd written 3 words in shaky handwriting. "We remember you." She hung the photo beside Jeremiah's and sat in the morning light with coffee and peace. For the first time in a long while, peace.